as we have debated the social, political, jurisprudential nightmare that had been created over the years. These are deeply rooted in uninformed discriminations and prejudices experienced and faced by those most vulnerable and marginalized. We need to turn this talk into action. As a community of people living with HIV, we encounter similar situations and prejudices. But it is wrong to assume that we are a homogeneous group. Firstly, we have heard about the rights of young people living with HIV, yet we often lump their issues within the broader community and ignore their specific needs and rights. We must address issues of disclosure, consent, and pediatric treatment for young people living with HIV. This includes their specific needs in relation to sexual and reproductive health and rights, assessing healthcare services, and the transition from adolescence to adulthood as a person living with HIV. Secondly, sex workers, including those living with HIV, are still being arrested and jailed even where there are no laws criminalizing the sale of sex. For sex workers, decriminalization is necessary but will not be sufficient to address discrimination and rights. Compulsory rehabilitation must end, so must rape and rescues. It's time we accepted that sex work is work. Thirdly, harm reduction must be scaled up and accepted by governments across the globe, and especially in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, as an effective and evidence-based strategy to improve the health, dignity, and rights of drug users. Substitution therapy, needle and syringe exchange, and safe injection messages must be made available in all countries to reduce drug-related harm and the spread of HIV and hepatitis C. Harm reduction does work. Lastly, the rights of gay people. Men who have sex with men and transgenders must be recognized and respected. Many countries continue to criminalize these communities, leaving them particularly vulnerable to HIV. We must focus our energies and efforts on advocating for social, cultural, and political change, especially in countries that equate these social identities with homicide. Despite the recent lifting of travel bans in the US, China, and Namibia, 51 countries still impose some form of restriction on the entry, stay, and residence of people living with HIV. Horrifyingly, there are still 22 countries that deport individuals once their HIV-positive status is discovered, and these restrictions need solutions for change. Thus, it is a great step forward for the US to have lifted their travel restrictions for people living with HIV this year. However, for the AIDS 2012 conference in Washington, D.C. to be truly representative and effective, we must ensure that individuals from key affected populations are granted the right to enter the US. GNP Plus on the CCC is very concerned about the current policies that will affect sex workers, people with criminal records, drug users, and anyone that could be denied entry. For AIDS 2012, GNP pledges to support the process to repeal immigration laws that target sex workers and drug users, as well as any others that prevented entry due to so-called moral reasons. For the reasons above, it is imperative that the International AIDS Society works with the US government to ensure that the representation at AIDS 2012 is credible and that people are not denied their right to participate because of visa and entry issues. Almost 30 years on in the response, we finally have a chance to collectively address the changes necessary to reverse the negative impacts of unsound structural approaches in the response to testing, prevention, treatment, care, and support for people living with HIV and key populations. This is positive health, dignity, and prevention, which is supporting people living with HIV and affected communities to lead in the HIV response, and to ensure that policies and programs are grounded in our realities. These programs will not be in place if donor countries do not and cannot honor their commitments. Those commitments must not be linked to moralistic policies that jeopardize the rights of sex workers, drug users, men who have sex with men, transgender people, migrant workers, and people living with HIV. We must match dollars to cents, and when I mean cents, I mean S-E-N-S-E, so that we can finally and equally match needs to rights. The Global Fund is going through its third voluntary replenishment this year. It is increasingly apparent that we are facing discontinued services, programs, and access to life-saving commodities, especially for treatment, due to the lack of available financial resources to maintain and scale up our responses. This has implications on many middle and upper middle income countries with concentrated epidemics in assessing funding to target interventions for the key affected populations. Nonetheless, the Global Fund must remain global to achieve the health-related MDGs and universal access, to fill the gaps at country level, so that we do not regress in terms of the achievements we have gained so far in the response to AIDS, TB, and malaria. Lastly, I just want to share something that a couple of my friends and I were talking about last night. We concluded that reaching the lounge, which is upstairs, for positive people, can be compared to reaching universal access. It's too far, and we have a long way to go. Especially if you're coming from a gold village, it's one natural stop away. At the same time, 2010 is a year not to forget. The universal access goals still need to be met. But realistically, where are we, and what next?